those of you who have never realized it yet, or maybe you've never been to a Valentine's banquet, it might come to a shock to you for me to say I love Prairie Home Companion. And, 2 weeks ago, Pastor Liz was having a conversation with a young man in Lake Wobegon. Actually, she was in St. Cloud. She wasn't in Lake Wobegon. And they were having a conversation, and it finally got to the point where he asked her what she did. And she said, well, I'm a pastor. And he said, whoa, that must be really rough to have to stand up in front of people and say something new every week. And she said, oh, no, you don't have to do that. You just say the same old thing over and over again. They never listen anyway. So Scott told me just to preach something that I'd already preached before. No, I wouldn't do that. It's always been uncomfortable for me, the idea of preaching something to people that they've already heard. I'm sure at some point I will, though. It's Thanksgiving, or it was last week, and today we are in the epistle to the Phillipians. And for me, in many respects, this is a book for this time of year. Paul returns to two ideas within this text over and over again as he dictates his letter. Those two themes being gratitude and joy. In the progression of his letter, which is hindered on Paul's gratitude and the gratitude of those who were in Philippi, we are reminded several times with the word rejoice. We are reminded to rejoice, and then we get rejoice in the Lord, and then we get rejoice with Paul, or rejoice with me, he says. So if you haven't figured it out yet, the sermon's on gratitude and joy, which I will declare to you in the same words that Mumford & Son uses. I know my weakness, and I know my voice, and I'll acknowledge that these are two subjects that I've had very little personal experience with in my life. At least that's the way I feel when I look back. Yet in the last 2 years, the last 2 years have brought a lot in terms of new experiences in the ideas of joy and gratitude in my life. In the past, you might have said, I believe that joyful people were the only people who had any reason to be grateful. I mean, think about it. They could be thankful. They had all the good. But honestly, I've learned three important things about gratitude and the relationship between gratitude and joy. And in only a short time, as I've sought to be more courageous and compassionate and connected in life, both with God and with people. So allow me to use those three things to outline the comments I'm going to make. Number one, without exception, every person I know who identifies themselves as joyful or identifies their life as a joyful life practiced gratitude and attributed their joy to their practice of gratitude. Paul says in the first chapter, starting in the third, I probably should be there, huh? In the third verse, I thank my God in all my remembrances of you, always offering prayers with joy in my every prayer for you all, in view of your participation in the gospel from the first days until now. For I am convinced that this very thing, that he who began a good work in you will perfect it until the day of Christ Jesus. For it is only right for me to feel this way about you all, because I have you in my heart. Since both in my imprisonment and my defense and confirmation of the gospel, you all are partakers of grace with me. Paul starts out his letter saying, every time I remember you, I give thanks for you, because you participate with me. Paul's thankfulness flows from the fact that he is connected with these people. He has a past and a life with this church. In fact, if you look at all the letters of Paul, although they are filled with imperatives and theological statements and sometimes some really pretty poetic language, if you just grab the front end and the back end, it's pretty clear that in almost every letter that Paul writes, he's thankful because he's connected to these people, because they contribute to his life and they participate in the gospel that he has given his life to share. And I think that's an interesting way to look at Paul's letters, that they're letters of thanksgiving. But being thankful is more than writing a letter, and being thankful is more than thinking about being thankful. Brene Brown confesses, "For years I subscribed to the notion of an attitude for gratitude." How many times have we heard that? I've since learned that an attitude is an orientation or a way of thinking, and that having an attitude doesn't always translate into behavior. She says, "It seems that gratitude without practice may be a little bit like faith without works. It's not alive." Gratitude has to be practiced. It has to be more than just thought about. It has to be done. And there are millions of ways in which we practice gratitude in our daily lives, or have the opportunity to practice gratitude in our daily lives. And Paul here shows us one small example of the way we practice gratitude, sharing what we have with other people, as this church does with Paul. Or the reverse, Paul sharing the message of hope and love that he has to people who might not have it. Without exception, people who see themselves as joyful actively practice gratitude and believe their joy is part of their gratitude. Number 2. Both joy and gratitude are spiritual practices that are bound in human connectedness and God. Paul puts this idea into a conditional statement in 2:1, in Phillipians 2:1 and following. "Therefore, if you have any encouragement for being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in his spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and of one mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value each other above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus." Joy and gratitude are positive streams that flow from the basic human desires that every one of us share. The desire to belong, and whether we acknowledge it or not, the desire to feel special. I